great to be here. First speaker for the first XConf in Hong Kong. I've already had some really interesting conversations today, and even over the last couple of days talking to Thoughtworkers about what they're hearing and doing with generative AI. And it blows my mind that the different use cases that people can come up with. I think it's just getting started, and this is a really exciting space. Today I'm going to talk to you about how you can leverage generative AI in your workplace. So what are the strategies and ways that you can accelerate your adoption to hopefully minimize waste and make sure that you're getting the most out of it. So there are so many possibilities out there at the moment that it's really hard to identify where it would make sense for you and your organization. And I'm sure many of your employees are running off and doing lots of great and exciting things with generative AI that perhaps you don't know about. So we probably need to add a little bit of governance and a few mechanisms around that just to make sure that we're on the right track and that we are seeing some benefits out of it. So just some recent studies around not generative AI itself, but the application and use of generative AI within organizations was done. And 30% of employees responded that they have used ChatGPT at work, which is really interesting. So we're seeing that people have used it at home, they've played around with it. All of a sudden they've started to realize perhaps this is a tool I can use to help with my productivity at work. Perhaps I could summarize that report. Maybe I could write an email to my boss or even write the board paper using ChatGPT. These are things that people are doing. The other interesting stat is maybe a little bit alarming is that 68% of people that responded said that they're using generative AI for work, but they're not telling their boss about it. So what does that mean? It means that as an employee, I think this is an opportunity to help me get at perhaps a competitive advantage. Maybe I can do more things, I can be faster. Maybe I can use it as a creativity tool to come up with new ideas. Maybe I can use it as my edge over others inside the organization. So if we're seeing more and more people using this, as leaders, executives, perhaps we should govern that somehow. Perhaps we should put some guardrails in place to make sure that when people are using these tools, they understand the risks and they understand how to leverage them most effectively. 67% of people responded that their companies are considering ways of using generative AI. And that's a pretty high number, but I actually think in reality, based on the conversations I'm having, it's probably much higher. So people, I think nearly every organization is probably thinking, where's my opportunity? So how does generative AI potentially disrupt my value chain? How can I leverage it to make my people more productive? And it's one of those things where people are both incredibly excited by the possibility, but executives are also really scared of it. There's these mixed feelings that we're having. And a lot of the conversations I'm having is with the exec team to really just give them that 101 of AI and generative AI. What does it mean and what are the risks? And hopefully today we can go through some of that and you can get a few tips on how you can actually get started using it. How's the translation going? Does it understand my accent? It's pretty good? Okay. The other main trend that we're seeing is that with the advent of generative AI, we're seeing that AI is all of a sudden no longer just the concern of the data and AI practice within inside organizations. So typically, AI was something that the tech function would sort out and look after. But with the advent of all of these new tools, all of a sudden everyone across the organization is trying to figure out ways they can use it. So the marketing department are using it to generate images for their latest marketing campaign. People are using it to write emails. How are we controlling these systems and how are we making sure that we're not losing too much IP, we're not exposed to some risks we're not aware of? And I thought it's always really helpful to look back in time to help us look forward to see what might be coming in the future. And if we go all the way back to electricity as an innovation, and it's a long way, bear with me, we can think of when electricity became a thing. Obviously, light bulbs were innovations, and people started to combine different obvious objects to create new things. So we can look at electricity plus a broom, that equals a vacuum cleaner, right? We use these things every day. Well, maybe not every day, but at least weekly, hopefully. We're still seeing that electricity itself is a major source of innovation. Even today, with all the electric vehicles, electricity as a path through some of our sustainability issues with renewable energy. So we can continue to see the impacts of these innovations well into the future. If we fast forward again to the internet. Now, I've been around long enough to remember working when the internet became a thing. There was life before the internet and there was life after it. And we saw and witnessed all of these organizations and people with really great ideas think, I'm going to get rich quick by putting my idea on the internet, instantly make a lot of money. It didn't quite pan out that way, and we did have the dot-com crash, which wiped out a lot of those organizations. But there were some winners, and a lot of really big organizations that we know today are based from that era, and we use their tools every single day. It's a fundamental part of the way we do business. It's a fundamental part of how we communicate. I can't remember a day where I didn't use the internet for the last 20 or so years. The next big wave was mobile. So I remember having my Nokia phone, playing Snake. I still remember that game fondly. Very, very quickly, the world moved from mobile phones into smartphones, and the explosion of apps that happened around there. So it was a mobile phone plus some really interesting application of that technology that opened up new use cases that previously weren't possible. And a whole bunch of businesses were built off the back of that. Think of Instagram and these types of things that really made sense and really blossomed with mobile phones. And that brings us to today. So we're in the age where we're seeing internet plus a thing is what all of the venture capitalists are dealing with at the moment. Everything has got AI built into it. Whether it's something really mundane and all of a sudden AI maybe is warranted for that product, maybe not. But it's hard to go past an idea that doesn't have AI in it at the moment. And what's different about this? AI has been around forever, right? And it's been around for at least 50 years in different forms. And when we talk about AI, it generally refers to the cutting edge of our thinking around intelligence. So the definition of AI, say 50 years ago, is very different from what we term AI today. And it typically means things that are practices or methodologies or types of technology that allow us to create these intelligent systems. And that's constantly evolving. So it's hard to put your finger on what AI is, but if the way I like to think about it is just the forefront of thinking and intelligence. I will get to the future, I promise. One more thing. So back in 1950, Alan Turing was working on one of the first machines that was considered to be part of the AI journey, an intelligent machine. This isn't Alan Turing, by the way. This is from the movie. But when he was asked, so can machines think? He said, I think a better question is, what can machines do? And that's the way I like to think about AI today, is not do these machines replace humans and is it going to be general intelligence soon or not? The question should be, what can we do with AI today? These things are fundamentally useful. There's lots of use. I'm sure you've played with ChatGPT and generative AI and you've done some interesting things. Maybe it's helped you decide what to have for dinner. Maybe it's decided what you should name your pet. I don't know. Useful things. Let's think about it that way rather than this is going to replace me and this is going to automate my job or put people out of work. I think this is a better way to think about it. So generative AI is already impacting the way we do work and our ways of working. Like I mentioned earlier, we had the stat around people using AI but not telling their bosses inside the workplace. I'm sure this is happening a lot. It's changing our productivity, and we can look at the software development process and how people are starting to partner with coding assistants to improve quality, hopefully, maybe improve the speed of developing code. There's probably lots of other opportunities to explore that as well. But what we're seeing is this mass experimentation at the moment. Even my mum knows how to use ChatGPT. And if my mum's using an emerging technology, we know it's hit the mass market, right? So everyone's using this, but I think we're just at the beginning of finding out what the opportunity actually is to leverage these technologies. So in an organization, I like to put things in group of three, and there's probably opportunities for content, processes, and business models. So when we think about content, particularly generative AI is great at generating content, and that could be marketing content, it could be images, it could be emails, it could be personalization and ways we communicate with our customers. Perhaps if we know a little bit about them, we can leverage that plus some generative AI to really start to connect with them in different ways. So the way we fundamentally generate content, whether that's for internal purposes or for external purposes connecting outside, that will fundamentally change with generative AI. Even looking at the new Adobe products and how they're integrating image generation into Photoshop and those types of tools, Canva is using these types of tools as well. We'll see more and more of that happen. How are you leveraging that inside your organization? I've spoken to a bunch of companies recently where the marketing team is absolutely using these tools, and they use it to generate new ideas that are pretty much the concept that they're going for, and then they hand it over to an expert, a graphic designer or someone like that, to actually flesh out the idea and implement that. So this iteration process and partnering with AI as a creativity tool is a really great way to think about it. The processes is the next really interesting one. So organizations are a collection of people, processes, and products. How are our processes going to change with AI and generative AI? How can we streamline things, automate things? One of the conversations I had yesterday was really interesting, where there was this idea that how do we use large language models to automate the processes and actually query the humans when it needed input or it needed some advice on what to do. And it's a really great way. It's sort of turning the tables on the sort of ChatGPT model where we ask it questions. Imagine the other side of the coin where the model actually asks human questions when it has some uncertainty about what should be the next action. Perhaps that's a really great way of thinking about how our processes could change. Business models is the next big one, and probably Horizon 3 for many organizations at the moment, but it's probably worth starting to think about that now, is what does this change in my business model? Are there new opportunities for me now? Or perhaps generative AI somehow erodes the moat around my existing value streams. Perhaps I need to reinforce certain areas of what I'm doing. Perhaps I need to pivot to other things. Is what I'm doing no longer valuable to society? Will people keep paying me for this? It's really important to start thinking about your business model and the impacts this will have on that. This is a comic. I really like the guy that makes these. And this basically encapsulates the conversations I've had for the last 3 months with executive teams. And it goes something like this. What will be the impact of ChatGPT on our business? There's a lot we don't know for sure, like how much of what it says is made up, or will it take away our jobs, or the security risks, or if it could damage our reputation. What do we know for sure? Only that we want to adopt it everywhere as fast as possible. It's pretty much the conversations I'm having with executive teams at the moment. And there are risks, there are a whole bunch of things we need to consider, but everyone wants it and they want it as fast as possible. If we can think about it in this way, there's risks of taking action and there's risks of taking no action here. So the risk of taking action and being a fast mover or a fast follower in your domain is that perhaps the road isn't completely paved and the way of adopting this isn't quite known yet. So there's a potential that you could do something that could have reputational risk. Is my mic still working? Action risk. So if you do something, perhaps you leak some IP, you might integrate it into a customer-facing product, and perhaps the model does something that you wish it didn't do. There was an example recently where a grocery store in New Zealand was using generative AI to do some recipe generation, and it actually went a little bit wild and started to recommend recipes that included bleach and all of these other weird products that you would never put in any food item. So perhaps it was a little bit too soon to do that type of development. There's ethics around this thing. There's legal, I've mentioned reputational risks, and obviously security risks. So moving forward, being one of the fast adopters of generative AI can be problematic. The other side of things is disruption risk as well. So what if we do nothing? What if we don't really adopt this in a systematic way? Perhaps we will be disrupted by our competition. Maybe they'll figure out how to use this tool to generate value and do what we do better than we can. There's customer expectations. So perhaps the way that you interact with your customers will fundamentally change. People might expect you to have a certain standard of communication that you might not be able to achieve otherwise. There's competition, there's a whole bunch of things here. So the things that an organization needs to think about is, what are the risks of moving too fast and what are the risks of moving too slow, and where would we like to be on that spectrum? So here's a whole bunch of things that aren't designed to scare you, but they're really designed to get you to think through this. There's fairness. There is explainability. So when we talk about perhaps using not just generative AI, but any AI, is the ability to explain what the model is doing. And I had a conversation recently with an insurance provider, and they said one of the biggest challenges they have in adopting AI is the explainability. Because if they make a price prediction or a recommendation based on location or other sort of factors, they need to explain that to the regulator to make sure there's no bias in that pricing system. And we've seen examples over the years where AI systems have done those things. They reinforce the biases that we have in the data set. Generative AI is no different to that. We need to be really careful how we deploy these things. Security is an obvious one. Intellectual property. So if we think about all of our employees running off and using these tools without telling anyone, perhaps they're putting in confidential information about our organisations or perhaps our customers into these services, and without really understanding who those companies are and what they're doing with this data, that could be really, really problematic. Perhaps they're using it to train more models in the future. It's the old thing about the internet that if the product is free, then you are the product. They're using your information for some monetary gain in the future. Privacy is a huge one. Social and environmental impact's another one. And over-reliance on AI can be problematic. So your workforce in the future will be AI augmented. This year is the first year that university students will start with generative AI as a tool that they use to learn and study and develop their ideas. They will join the workforce in 3 to 4 years, and they'll expect that the employees that they join will support their choices in using these tools and will actually enhance their capabilities. I'll just speed up a bit. I just got the 10-minute warning. It's already co-piloting a lot of what we do at work. There's a great talk coming up next about the software development lifecycle. We've spoken about creatives and using it to generate image and text. Marketing people are using this for generating content and the way they communicate. Managers are using it for strategy. So we can ask tools to come up with strategies to approach a different market. Perhaps things are obvious that it comes up with. Maybe it can come up with some new things we haven't thought of before. So without taking a strategic approach to AI, we're really going to be stuck with the low-hanging fruit. And these are all of the systems that everyone else in the competitive market also have access to. So we need to figure out ways that how do we use our data or our unique value to create AI systems that are going to benefit us in the future. One of the first things you need to start with is educating your organization. And it starts at the top. So how can we make sure that the executive suite actually understand what the risks and benefits are? They understand some of the terminology to allow them to make these decisions around how we invest in this and how we move forward. The next level down is the GMs and the vice presidents of the organization. How do we give them the ability to identify opportunities to use AI in their products and processes and things that they do? And the last level there is the practitioners. How do we make sure that we're supporting them in their choices of using these tools, but also giving them the ability to use them for the software development lifecycle and educating them in sensible and safe ways of using them? So once you go through that process of educating everyone, you're going to have this explosion of ideas. Everyone's going to have a great idea on how we can use AI for doing different things. And ideas won't be your problem. It'll be coming up with a systematic way of sifting through those and making sure that you're investing in ideas that will have the biggest impact. So the AI ecosystem is moving so fast that any multi-year strategy around AI is probably going to be outdated before you finish writing it. So we need to think about things differently. I don't know if you remember playing with Lego as a kid, but I do, and I still play with Lego with my kids every day. And one of the great things about Lego is its composability. So we can take these little pieces that by themselves don't do a lot, but when they're combined together with other pieces, they can create something more functional, something more interesting. And it's the interface between the pieces that's really important here, the way they click together. And I think that's a really good metaphor for how we should think about our AI strategies. We should think about AI systems that solve a small problem, but when combined appropriately with other AI systems or other systems in general, we can create these higher intelligence systems. So this composability around AI strategy is probably something you could consider. There's going to be a myriad of tools that you could use to solve for this problem. How do you make sure that they're all working together to solve it in a meaningful way and you're not taking a scattergun approach where everyone's off using a different tool or a different approach? And some composable systems I really like to reference, and some great examples to get you thinking about it is self-driving cars. We can think about each sensor in that car as a small subsystem. And one of them might detect lanes, one of them might detect the speed of the car in front of you and the distance to that car. One of them might be doing the cruise control or something like that. But when these tiny systems are composed together appropriately in a systematic way, we could end up with a car that could be self-driving in the future. And maybe even some cars now are very, very close to that. It's a great example of a composable system. The next one there is augmented reality headsets. It require a lot of sensors doing a lot of different things to create these really immersive experiences. And that's a great example there of doing live language translation, similar to this thing that I hope is working, that displays the translation in an augmented reality way. So that's what the potential of composable systems done well can look like. If we take a look at what could happen if it's not done well, perhaps it will look something like this. So instead of having that really cool, fancy-looking self-driving car, you might end up with this homemade thing that maybe works some of the time, not all of the time. And maybe your AR headset, if it's not designed well and composed well together, might look a little bit homemade like that other one. So the most difficult challenge for business is not to invent innovative products, it's to build an organization that can continually innovate. And I think that's where we're at the moment with generative AI and our adoption is not can we figure out how to use one tool well or adopt it for one problem, but how do we use this in a systematic way? Some really basic tips to get started. Make sure that when you're innovating or thinking about this, it's aligned with your business strategy. So if you have goals as an organization, that's where you should be investing your money. Don't have people running off and building things out that really aren't going to help you achieve those strategic goals. Vision, goals, bets, initiative, all really basic stuff, but often we don't see organizations doing this. The next one is, so you'll have a lot of ideas that people will come up with. You'll need a systematic way to evaluate those ideas. So coming up with the criteria for what the organisation wants to achieve and assessing ideas against those is a really, really obvious way. There's a whole bunch of techniques you can use to generate ideas. You can even use generative AI to generate ideas in a really meta approach. Making sure that they follow this process, you go through the funnel of developing POCs. The result of those POCs could be something that's useful, it could be not useful. And there's always a third category. It's the POC that never dies, and we call it the zombie POCs. They just keep going, there's no real purpose. And when we're developing these systems and coming up with these experiments, we need to make sure that we have criteria that will tell us when to stop experimenting with something and move on to something perhaps more useful. So what are some of the no regrets things that you can do today to really get started? Start with that executive training. Get everyone up to speed and work through the organisation. Think of this as an organisational transformation. We want to be AI first. How do we do that? I think awareness is probably a really good place to start. Set up the operating model for AI and data. So it's great to use third-party tools, but if we really want to have a strategic advantage, it's going to be using our own internal data and systems to create that. Identify and prioritize use cases. Like I said, you're going to have a lot of use cases and ideas being thrown at you. How do you systematically sift through those to find out the ones that may have the best benefits? Lay out a clear technology strategy. And this can include partners as well. So which of the cloud providers are you partnering with to develop these systems? You're probably not going to build it all yourself. Perhaps there's others that you can leverage. Hopefully, it's abundantly clear that there's a whole bunch of opportunity here. There's a few things you need to think about to make sure that you don't make those fast mover mistakes, but you also don't want to be at the other end where you're not adopting fast enough. And perhaps you get overtaken by your competition. Hopefully you get the sense from this talk that there is a few simple things you can start to do now to start to navigate that. And you can be inspired to take that next step and start to use these things in your organizations. Because believe it or not, your employees are already using this, so you may as well harness that excitement to your advantage. Thanks so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.